Good morning, viewers. Welcome to this edition of Focus on Parliament. I am your host, Agather Atuhaire, and today we look at the business that has been transacted in the second session of the 11th Parliament, which went on recess on the 29th of September 2022, having had 37 sittings ever since it commenced in June. 17 bills were passed in that session. 16 resolutions were passed and 22 reports were adopted. Today we look at what this business means, and especially one of the bills that was passed in that session was the Computer Misuse Amendment Bill. It was assented to by the President on Thursday, the 11th, was it 12th? The 12th of, or 13th of October, and we want to look at that and these other laws that are being passed. And to discuss that with me, I have seasoned legislator, the Honourable Karuhanga Gerald. Welcome to the show, Honourable.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I also have Timothy Chemonges. Timothy works with Parliament Watch. He's the head of Parliament Watch, an organization that observes parliamentary processes and proceedings. Welcome to the show, Timothy.
Thank you, Agatha, and good morning to our viewers.
So, Honourable, I'll start with you. We have been asking ourselves the issue of the business conducted by this 11th Parliament, where so many bills are passed in just a short time, and it's something they pride in that we have passed 50 bills in our first year, for example. But we have been wondering, are we paying more attention to quantity rather than quality? For example, in this business that I'm telling you that commenced in June after the reading of the budget and the State of the Nation address, they passed 17 bills. 7 of those bills were passed in one day. And in that one day, the Honourable Assembly raised a question about procedure, about, the rush and hasty manner in which they were passed. But let's start with the Computer Misuse Amendment Bill, which, among other things, seeks to legislate against hate speech, against unsolicited information. How does this affect the laws, or what does it say about the laws that we are making as a country?
Thank you. Laws are primarily meant to keep society in order and to live in harmony and progress. Now, when laws become tools, instruments to curtail, muzzle, fail individuals or societies or communities to engage in a rather peaceful but also free environment, then it takes us back to the very statement of the wise legend, St. Augustine, who said that unjust laws or unjust law is no law at all. Firstly, there is a deliberate, orchestrated, well laid out procedure of passing any law, and this procedure is not just ceremonial. It's not a function that you go and it's not a birthday party. So it's the import of the procedure to make a law is almost as important as the law itself, because this is an understanding of a society, of a country, that this is how we are going to move on this particular aspect of life. Now, for that to be ascertained, to be processed, it must be done in very sincere and open, but also very meaningful in the sense of is this nation building? Is this building a great culture for a country? If you pass 7 bills in a single day, what legislative culture are you building? What are you telling people about the confidence in this very law you are passing? So I keep thinking that some of the things people do using their positions in public offices really are somehow done in such a rather light manner, as if they don't appreciate the impact, not just on the immediate, which that alone is very serious, but also the the cultural impact, the what you begin building, and begins to be the norm. So what ordinary should be abnormal becomes the normal, because that's what you've kept working towards. So, I mean, I want to believe that the legislators, parliamentarians appreciate where this country is. They go campaign, relate with the people, and you would want to believe, if you are going to suggest a law, a computer misuse amendment bill. So, firstly, does this law speak to the people, to their challenges? So if you pass 7 bills in a day, to what extent do these bills actually improve the plight of the people? How relevant are these laws? Is it basically about regime retention of power? Is it about the wishes of an individual called the president? Because I think sometimes we really need to get people appreciate the power. The power, when people wake up, and for some reason, the last election one is a very rainy day, they wake up, leave their homes, and say we are going to decide, and say these are the people we are going to entrust with our voices, with literally our minds actually. That's not an ordinary thing. And so many times you want to think, and I'm one of those who would want to imagine that when you have that platform to push for a given law. Now, for me, the most disturbing one has been that I think that the so-called computer misuse amendment law, because you can tell that it's deliberately intended to muzzle, to make people less free to engage using computers and mobile phones and other similar gadgets, including probably iPads. So, and then you're thinking, but with all the challenges, so people are suffering inflation, they are suffering fuel prices, they are suffering food prices, they're struggling with school fees. You even come and add more and say, no, even speaking about those things, we are going to make sure you can hardly talk about them freely. Please, it's one thing to make my life very difficult, but it's also another to make it even more difficult by failing me to say how I even feel. Exactly. Yeah. So, and sometimes you're thinking, aren't these fellows pushing us too far? Like, because you know, one thing leads to another. Sometimes you can think this is an isolated case, but it can be one and then another until people reach that boiling point and say, oh, no. I mean, what? You get people to a point of even believing that living is even not worthwhile. Yeah? So we must be very cautious, and I implore the parliamentarians that making these laws. And by the way, the parliamentarians have even the mandate and audacity to even challenge the leadership of that parliament. That, for instance, if you think the speaker is pushing you too fast, if there are adequate voices, they can engage and say, but wait a minute, where are we going? This law is not being appropriately processed. So we hope people will reach, because it appears we are at this crossroad point now, where you would think people would say now, I think we really need to rethink as legislators.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tim, the last time you were here when we were speaking about the passing of the bill, you talked about how the environment was, how invested the speaker looked in it, and of course even I saw the footage. Yesterday, after the president assented to it, she was among the first people who went to Twitter to thank the president for assenting to those bills, and she started with the computer misuse bill. What does that say about a referee of sorts who is there to preside over this legislation process?
So Agatha, thank you so much. And today, as we look at the part of the business that has been transacted in the second session, I would just first to start by distinguishing what a session would be, because we're in part of the second session. So ideally, this session, we're in the second session, which will go up to around May 2023. That's when the second session will end. So as of now, we have close to 17 bills which have been passed.
I think this is the first meeting of the second session.
Yes, it's the first meeting. So I was among the Ugandans who were very hopeful that probably the president would have not assented to the bill, the computer misuse.
The only one.
And I imagine very many were very disappointed, because appearing before the committee, our submission was that this law was in the first place not necessary. Two, while appearing before the committee, we thought probably what we had submitted were not adequate enough. But when the Ministry of ICT came on board and actually affirmed what we had said, that this law needed to be thrown out, there was no need for it. We thought that the committee would have considered it. And to that extent, looking at the committee deciding otherwise, of course, I know they have the discretion to make their decisions after stakeholders have inputted, but it's adequate for them to look into and consider the same. So now that the president has assented, I think we now shift the hope to the courts, if they are vigilant Ugandans who will proceed to court. But I would imagine that the interests vested in by the leadership in this law speaks a lot, to the extent that you have freedom of expression, which is provided for under the law, under the constitution.
Yeah.
And the continued infringing on the same, it directly affects how Ugandans and how citizens relate, express themselves, but also ensure that the concerns they raise actually reach out to those in leadership. Because also we've noticed that there's a huge gap between the leadership and the citizenry. There's a lot to explain to that, but there are factors like this when we pass retrogressive laws to suppress that, to further widen that gap. So I would imagine that, of course, the speaker going ahead to celebrate, it meant that it was a win on her side. It was a win, and I think it's a goal achieved. But I think that now we have our hopes with the courts. If they really consider it objectively, this law should not see the light of day. Yes.
So Honourable Karuhanga, I would like to ask about the process of passing the laws that you alluded to. The report of the committee, and even Tim and his team that appeared before that committee, says that all the 18 stakeholders that were consulted said this law is unnecessary at best, draconian at worst, and really repressive. But the committee went ahead and recommended. How does it work? How do you consult people? Because I thought by the time you're consulting all those people, their input is important. But if their input is not what is captured in the final report, how does it work in your experience?
Firstly, along related to what you're asking, you have every reason to engage stakeholders, not just by your good sense of being a nice chairperson of the committee or members of the committee. No, the law, the constitutional order demands that legislative work must be consultative. That's why even making the constitution, even making amendments of the constitution, you need to hear out citizens.
Yeah.
And it's a very primary part of making the law, Because remember, this law is not being made in isolation. It's the people's law. It's the citizens' law.
Yeah.
It's not your law as a committee of parliament or even as the entire parliament. No, because whatever you're doing it on behalf of Ugandans. So precisely, you're more or less like a board of a corporation, because then the shareholders, in this case, who are the citizens, and that's why after 5 years they say, I think you have done this and that. Then again, of course, the process is also manipulated, which is the election. So you would ordinarily have imagined that their views, their report, and the several other teams that were engaged should have been seriously considered in very distinctive ways. One being a recognition of the views in the report itself, that we met the foreign groups. This was the communication of this group. This group, this was the view of this group. These leaders, we met some religious leaders, we met civil society organizations. This is what they said. We met cultural leaders. This is what they. So we met institutional leaders, professors or experts on this, and these were the views. And that informs two things. One, whether the committee needs to further probe or engage on certain aspects, because sometimes you get a view of the experts and you realize that this is something you need to take a little more interest in. And then two, you also need to make sure the record is clear, that people don't think you just sat in a small team, came up with a law, or against the views of so many, you decided to put together your own views or the directed views. Yeah. So then you just present something to appease or to enrich the initially intended position. So I think and what really can be quite depressing in our public affairs is these things we are talking about are largely known to these people. Yeah. So I am certain that there is no committee chairperson or even a member of parliament of a given committee that doesn't, there is one who doesn't appreciate the importance of listening to the views of the people you are consulting or you are engaging with during making this law. So where is the problem? So they understand the importance of the process. We want to believe they do, and hopefully, and I hope every Uganda wants to believe they do. And then how come they just ignore all that? And when it comes to processing the report, that becomes baseless or useless. So I think one, of course, the obvious reason largely is to achieve the intended objective. They say he who pays the piper calls the tune, yeah. But in this case, it's even the citizens that pay, yeah, because I mean, all leaders in this country are from the taxpayers. So it's the taxpayers; they are the ones who are the ones who are paying the piper. So they should call the tune, yeah. Because I mean, when you think about it, Parliament, for instance, they don't even earn because of the wishes of the president, no. And now that's why probably it was very well spelled out in the Constitution. So I really think this special mandate that certain individuals are really lucky to obtain shouldn't be taken very, we seem to take it as if it's a joke. And then before you know it, the entire country thinks Parliament has become more or less like a joke.
Okay, so Honourable, the other issue that came out was that there's a clause that wasn't part of the bill, the clause on social media.
Yes.
And it came out in the report. It didn't even come up during the process of consultations, but it was in the report and it was adopted as a part of the law, saying that whoever publishes anything on social media which is against the laws of Uganda would be punished. At what point of the lawmaking process should amendments come? Because I thought if Parliament as a house has sent a bill to the committee, that's the bill the committee should scrutinize and review. Is that a legal thing to do, that a committee will import into the bill something that wasn't originally a part of it?
You know, in the 10th Parliament, we saw very interesting scenarios where the leadership of the committee on one or two occasions concocted a committee report. And you would think, how on earth can anybody even have the guts to even think about it, later on do it? Because you know this is going to be subjected to a debate. People are going to stand up and say, wait a minute, where did you get these things from? So, so for the committee, for instance, if the bill is from Parliament, what the committee ordinarily is mandated to do is to examine, study the bill, and then make a report. Now, that report must not be created in someone's in office and sit and say this is the way the report should look like. No, it is processed. Actually, that's why the one of the most critical documents for any legislation are those committee minutes, because the minutes precisely give a chronological order at how decisions were arrived at. Yeah, and then you can tell and say, this member said this, and then this decision was made. Now, when the minutes are not there, or they are doctored, or even ignored, because sometimes people may had delve into it, but if the law is challenged, then they will probably go dig to see what were these minutes. So I think the committee must, at any one point, Committee of Parliament, appreciate that its mandate is largely on examining the bill, engaging the stakeholders, and then process the report basing on the engagements they have had. Not on just one, let's say, committee chairperson sitting in an office and say, this is what I think I can drop in.
Yeah.
No. I remember that's how I ended up in court with the entire Parliament. Because, I mean, we sat as a committee of budget. In no place whatsoever did we agree or even discuss that each member will take 20 million shillings. And then the chairman, I don't know where he got this thing from, stands up on, now he's a Minister of Finance,
Stands up
on the floor of Parliament and says that, that the members also agreed that each one of us should, this
was Honourable.
Yes, I turned and looked at my colleagues to see if I could get a committee member. It was a shock. It was a shock, and then I knew, of course, they had difficulty of inviting me to speak, because ordinarily the procedure says if you have a minority report, you'd send from the main committee report, whether you're one member or two. The chairman, after presenting his report, invites you to present your minority report. Yeah. So I could see how he had the struggle, but I think he knew the procedure couldn't be avoided. And then, of course, I was invited on the floor. And initially, I knew if I began there, they would not even allow me read half of my report of the minority. Then I started with the report, but I could see the people were very uncomfortable. They knew where I was going. Then I said, anyway, but before he even proceeds, where is this from? I mean, members, of course, knew this was benefiting them, started shouting, and it became really a shouting match. And eventually I realized I couldn't be even given a chance to present the minority report. And as usual, it was passed in chorus. The ayes have it. And I said, okay, does this now, where does this go? Because for me, it wasn't just about the incident. It was more about the culture.
The
It was,
precedent
yes,
you are setting.
yeah, what the president was setting. But so is Parliament going to remain operating this way? So with the next Parliament and then another, I said, no, this is so wrong. And that's how I ended up with it. I mean, it was difficult, a very difficult decision. I have friends, I knew their friends would be upset in that Parliament. I knew their friends who thought I was crazy.
Who goes to court over getting money?
Over, yeah, because for me it wasn't just because I mean you can have the money, but first of all, how much can you have anyway, or how much can you eat? But secondly, like what are we doing? You've crossed the entire country, go home. Then only to yet you've grabbed 20 million.
Yeah.
We said, okay, if this is about COVID, and maybe to us, as it appeared, then let's agree and say we have 100 or 200 million for each district. And then the members and the district chairperson of that very district, members of parliament, can sit down and plan for it. And they said, no, we want our thing. I said, no. Then it seems to be so that's how. That's so you can see how when you don't process well, given either a report or a bill of a committee of parliament, you can even end up embarrassing the entire institution. Yeah. In this particular case, it was sad. I mean, on one hand, you feel you're doing the right thing, but on the other hand, you also feel how it's embarrassing. I mean, you're bringing the whole entire institution into ridicule, but that's what had happened. Yeah. So the processes must, as not just as a by the way or as a light thing, they must be followed. That's why on the process alone, a law can be declared null and void. It can be repealed. Yeah. It can it can even be ordinarily you can say it can be trashed. Because then how did you arrive at the law? Yeah. So
and there are many that have the Anti-Homosexuality Act, for example, so it was on procedure. Then I think there's another law about the referendum of 2000, early 2099, which was on consultations. So yeah, there's so many grounds. But I wanted to say that for the benefit of our viewers, the Honourable Karuhanga was talking about the issue of a supplementary budget in the 10th Parliament, which was to be passed to fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And the MPs decided that they also needed to get 20 million each to go and in their fight, in their constituencies against COVID-19. And the Honourable Karuhanga, together with the Honourable Jonathan Odu, yes, challenged it in court. Was that money ever refunded?
Yes, for the first time. And I think it was because, thank God, sometimes we do things and you think you want to say what's, or at least in this case of in the list of positions, at least you have a precedent, you have a record of court and say this was declared to be a wrong thing.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, it wasn't only declared to have been a terrible mistake, but also indeed members refunded because they knew there could be some legal implication. At some point would be captured in the Auditor General's report. Yeah. And then there was a court directive, and then you don't refund, which would also be a contempt of court. So eventually, I want to believe that the super majority of the MPs refunded that money. Okay. Now, of course, some members were asking me, where do you think this money is going to go? And I said, well, we can only do our part. Yeah.
That's what Ugandans say, that even if you take it back, it's going to be eaten anyway. It's a terrible excuse. So Tim, going back to the business transacted in the first meeting of the second session so far, you have 37 sittings, and in those sittings you've passed 17 laws. And you have adopted 16 resolutions and I think 22 reports. You have been covering Parliament, maybe following all this. What's your view as a body that does research about that, and also maybe the quality of these bills, reports, and all these things being passed?
So just I needed to add a bit of what Honourable was saying.
Yeah.
In Uganda, we by law and by practice, we have two major ways in which a law ideally comes to a law comes to actualization. Yeah. And that can be either by a private member or by government.
Yeah.
Other jurisdictions have other ways, like the committees can actually come up with that, and that we don't have it here. And so the idea that the committee can, at its own will, come up with additional clauses, come up with additional without the consultation of members, it's I think it's a total breach of the law. And the other thing I need to comment is other than just passing the laws, we have an institution, we have a parliament to protect in far as the image and the work it does. And so when you have laws like the Computer Misuse Act being passed, not only does it just affect how it's actually how it is operationalized, but also the image of parliament. You have a public viewing a parliament as a hostile parliament which is responsible for passing retrogressive and laws which is a wrong direction. So to the business transacted, if you look at the 11th parliament, during the second session, we had a total of 11 bills. The whole second session, 11 bills were passed.
Which parliament?
That's the 10th parliament. During the whole second session, we had 11 bills passed. For this 11th parliament, for the first meeting, you have 17 bills. Of those, we had close to 9 bills which were passed, and 7 bills which were passed in
3 hours, not just in one day, but in 3 hours. I counted. Yeah.
So looking at the quality, it's clear that most of them, first of all, they are amendments. Majority of those are amendments, amending the previous laws. But if you look at the quality and the impact they have as far as implementation of the same is concerned, you will clearly notice that there is a bit of it keeps on going down. There is a target for the second session close to 62 bills to be passed. So that means there is still a long way to go. And I think this sort of conversation is awaiting bigger shock.
So Honourable, how is it practical to pass 62 bills in 1 year? And 1 year, we are not talking about a whole year, by the way, because you have this, because like now this recess is 1 month.
Yeah, 1 month.
And then they take a recess during Christmas. And then you have months where you are discussing the budget. How practical is it to pass 62 bills? And there are bills there are laws that the country can rely on.
You know, there is the bigger picture of this whole thing, how parliament is being run. And basically, it speaks volumes to what the regime is bent on as far as the destruction of institutions is concerned. So the moment you take away all the confidence and trust from the people in public institutions, in the judiciary, in the legislature, then you are not just taking away the hope or the confidence of the people, but you're actually crushing their spirits. So people begin to realize that, but where can I even get help from? So if you notice, in recent times, we have more cases where people really carry out lots of mob justice. Yeah. So if they grab any thief, ordinarily they would want to grab a person and rush to police. So they handle it there and then, simply because they have almost lost all their confidence in any institution of government. Now, and that's just a tip of the iceberg. It's just the depth of this is, if you study how all this is happening, you can tell that this is a grand scheme, which has been the spirit of the regime, but it has been incremental in approach. So you don't crush everything primarily at a go. So keep taking away one by one, one by one, one by one. And as Ugandans, we must be really, really concerned. Because for me, what's happening in Parliament is quickly an example of what actually is happening to the entire country. So it's not surprising at all that you have. I mean, how on earth can you be so articulate, diligent? That, I mean, 62 bills. These are laws, for heaven's sake. And why people don't even take these laws anymore seriously? Because even, I mean, even the way they are passed, it's like, it's like someone is just taking a glass of water. It's no serious business. Yeah. So I think what we are doing to ourselves, and in this particular case, the leaders, you have no idea, and anyone should take this very seriously, where you can find this country in another 10 or so years if we keep on this trajectory, if we keep on this trend. Because when people lose hope, when people become literally faithless in anything, I hope at least people keep still believing in God, yeah. But in our earthly issues, when people really hardly have confidence almost in anything, that can be very, very it can only tell of a very turbulent times ahead. So I implore again, in this case, the leadership of Parliament, the members of Parliament, to really, really take their mandate very, very seriously. I remember one incident in Parliament, and this was the position. So someone came up with an idea of taking away the powers of making laws actually by members of Parliament, and actually succeeded. And what did they do? They introduced a clause in the Public Finance Management Act, which was that for any private member of Parliament, to introduce a private member's bill or a law, simply put, you need a certificate of financial implication from the Minister of Finance. So what did this mean? That if you didn't get this certificate, however brilliant your ideas may be, however useful or relevant they may be, they will find no way into becoming law for this country. Unless if you're lucky, the executive wanted that particular law. Now, and then I recall that there was a provision in the Constitution that, for instance, if the president does not assent to any bill twice, if it is sent to him the way it is, if he refuses and says, no, I'm not comfortable with this, he sends it to Parliament, and then Parliament sends it back to him, and he doesn't assent to it, that becomes law without the president's assent.
Yeah,
that's right.
Parliament can pass it with the 2/3 majority.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when it becomes law without the president's assent, it becomes law. It becomes the law of the land, just like any other law. So on this particular occasion, when we were going through the Public Finance Management Act, normally there is a bill almost every year because of, I don't know, the state, how it manages its resources. And then I engaged Parliament. I said, look, how can we be the ones to have a position in this law, taking away our legislative powers that we only have because of the mandate of the citizens? And then quickly, in unison, Parliament agreed to remove that clause quickly. And we said, look, the certificate of financial implication is important, yes, but should it not be granted within 2 months, it should be dispensed with, and a member should still be able to present a private member's bill. Now, the import of that was that you restore some confidence, some strength
Are you
of
saying
Parliament.
it was removed?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And I'm actually telling a true story of what happened, what we pushed, and on this particular day we were able to achieve.
I thought it was what failed Honourable Wilfred Nwagaba's constitutional amendment bill.
And that's, I think, probably if you are talking about the earlier position, because he has been pursuing this constitutional amendment bill for some time. So if it is earlier before, that was before maybe when they had failed him, but now it can no longer be the case, unless again when we left Parliament again, since they are passing 2 bills in 1 year, someone may again have smuggled it in.
No,
Because
I think the current position is that if a member goes to seek for the certificate,
yes,
if within 60 days,
60 days,
there is no response,
yes,
it shall be assumed as though the certificate has been given.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that was
what if the response is they are refusing to give you the certificate?
no,
There's an objection.
Yeah, no. The idea is if it's not granted, if they don't grant you the certificate.
Okay.
Now, the content can say anything, whatever they find, but if it's not granted, I moved that in Parliament, and I could tell that the colleagues were really very quickly in agreement. And the reason I'm sharing this story is because I'm trying to show colleagues how, those who are in Parliament now, how you can actually, even if you're not many in number, you can find those very objective positions to basically restore that confidence of Parliament, to keep it alive, to keep the trust people have in the institution alive. Because the moment that is taken away, then the institution becomes baseless, it doesn't become worthwhile. So basically, it's still again within the mandate of the leaders to use the positions they have to restore this confidence by making laws, by processing them in the most accepted ways, which in almost all cases are well laid out in different legal provisions.
Thank you, Honourable. Let's take a very short commercial break and then return and discuss the way forward, seeing the trend as it is now. We'll be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We're glad you're still with us. Welcome back from the commercial break. We are still on Civic Space TV, and the show is focused on Parliament, still with Honourable Gerald Karuhanga and Timothy Chemonges from Parliament Watch. So now, Tim, I would like for you to make for us a comparison, having really observed these processes over the parliaments. What is the problem now that we have? Is it the quality of MPs? Is it the politics of the day? Why are we having bills passed in that manner? First of all, disregarding processes, but also in a way that we are now wondering whether they are quality and also relevant, but also enforceable. Yeah.
So the primary thing that you actually read is the interests the interest. So whoever holds the interests, especially now, and there seems to be more determination by Parliament to ensure that some of these laws go by hook or crook.
Yeah.
So say like the Commuter Misuse Act, if you look at the origin, you notice that though it was Nsereko who moved it, there are signs that the leadership at Parliament were passionate in having this bill pass. And so that tells you that progressively, depending on who is interested in the bill, it determines how it actually takes it takes shape. So you've seen there are laws which are set by the executive. Clearly, those you see the manner in which they're handled, and even those of us who are stakeholders and make contribution, we find that it's just blessing already what's there. But clearly, I think that there are a number of things that inform how things are going. That will include the leadership that we have currently, the executive, but also the politics of the day. You will take notice that the manner in which people express themselves appears to be a threat to a specific individuals or a group of them, and so to their thinking, the best way is to curtail that. And you've noticed that in the recent elections, Kenyan elections, you will see how Ugandans are very passionate and they are contributing as though they were parties. And yet so you notice that that only tells you that there seems to be a problem as far as when our time for election comes. And so if you look at how Facebook is still, I think, under control, the taxes which are being introduced. So you if you look at all this, you see that there's a clear direction towards ensuring that freedom of expression is suppressed.
Yeah.
But there are a number of factors that inform really what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honourable, my question is on what you're talking about, the leadership. He also alluded to it being the ones interested in a bill like this one. What are we going to do now that we have a parliament that passes the laws on its whims? Of if I woke up and felt like I don't want this, I'm going to go and pass a law, and it passes, like we've seen with this bill.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Firstly, I think it's a dangerous culture that individuals can just literally process a law by manipulating every process that is available, because before you know it, someone may introduce a grandfather into a law, and it becomes law. The name is because one may have a wish and say, my dream has always been to have one of my grandparents written on the laws of Uganda. And before you know it, you have, I mean, seriously, it is sad that that we can even joke about that way, because unfortunately that's where we seem to be. One would say that's where we would seem to be headed.
Yeah.
No, it appears that's where we are already there. We seem to have already arrived. So it is really a very, very worrying trend. Now, sometimes you want to ask yourself, so is this irreversible? Can one rethink and say, because at the end of the day, we only have one country as citizens called Uganda. And so we must work towards its progress.
Yeah.
The number one beneficiaries are certainly us, the citizens. Yeah? So I think it's high time the entire citizenry in different quarters, different avenues, including those they are trying to muzzle or close, like the usage of computers or related gadgets. We must speak out and engage on these issues as loud as we can, irrespective of whether you are political or apolitical or even completely disinterested. Because you see, I mean, people have said it over and over and written about it over and over again. What the philosopher, I think it was Pastor Nimora, who said that first they came for the communists,
Mm.
and I did not speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a member of the trade union. And then eventually they came for the Jews. They didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then eventually they came finally for me. And then there was no one speak for me. So ultimately, when those we've empowered, the war leaders, are not speaking or legislating in our own interest, then as citizens, we must again go back. And thank God we have this civic space, because that's the way we can bring back and say, look, we need to bring back our country to order. Because many Ugandans, look, we could have been created as Afghanistans, or as people from Iraq or from Switzerland. But God, in His decision and wisdom, said we are Ugandans, so we must face our challenges and deal with them. No one is going, however much, it does not matter to what extent we lament. It just has to be our efforts that we must tap into our best of potential and say, look, leaders, this is wrong. You cannot legislate as if you are passing some funny jokes. This is not comedy. Yeah. So we and I believe, I strongly believe that when people come out in January and they mean to stand for a position, sometimes it can take a little longer than you'd want the course of events to happen. But eventually, when people are very insistent on a process or on an issue, before you know it, sometimes actually in most cases, it even surprises you. It takes much shorter than you have. Sometimes certain things certainly take a little longer, but and sometimes why they take longer is also the less numbers or less voices on a given issue. But when there is strength in voicing out concerns, in raising these particular issues, the more strength you have, the more voices you have, the more efforts you have, then the more benefits the citizenry gets from the aggregate of these efforts. So the dividends of our efforts, we must have them, but then we must also first invest in these efforts. Yeah. So I think not all hope is lost, no, because we are still here as Ugandans, very energetic, largely young country. So, but the most critical thing is people let's not all go to bed. I mean, if we all keep quiet about these things, then we will not just be taken for a ride, but we may end up being the ride itself. So it will be hard. It will be much worse than it is already.
Yeah, so sad. So among the business transacted, the resolutions passed, there was the resolution about government acquiring 150,000 shares in Roko. And you know the way in which it was passed. When it was passed in that manner, the opposition wrote seeking to table a motion to revisit it. And I remember what the Honourable Speaker said when she was communicating, having received that notice. She said that will be revisited at an appropriate time. And this was at the beginning, almost at the beginning of this sitting, and it ended without it being revisited. So Tim, what the prioritization in what business comes first? What is your view about it?
So it's very interesting to that resolution is included as part of the resolutions that Parliament. Yet, if you look at it in an objective way, you notice that it doesn't qualify.
Yeah.
Because it's a motion that, including this specific resolution as part of the resolution of the whole House.
Of the business
transacted. And ideally part of the resolution of the House. It's an interesting view to look at how resolutions really these days come to be included and qualify to be then. You'll notice that for this specific resolution, the members had a totally different view, and the presiding officer, who was Thomas Taibo, Right Honourable Speaker, had a totally different view.
Yes.
And the speaker's position took the day. It tells you that back again to the point of interests. Whoever has the interest in a specific matter, it will determine whether it goes and how long it takes. But looking at it, you will notice that even when you go to the record of the House, that's the Hansard, you notice that it was skewed to favor what ideally should have happened. There was a bit of changes which were
edited.
It was edited. It tells you that with that, it's a clear indication that things are not as right. Whereas we desire for A, we are achieving B. And also clearly, you see that the directions in which some of these resolutions, especially on these resolutions and matters, say laws, you have resolutions which serve the interest of the executive, are taken into keen interest. And so I think there is a bit of the quality also, as the quality of the resolutions a bit go down, but also how the public, through their members of parliament, are directly involved. Others are maybe coerced, others are compromised to ensure that certain positions are taken. And so it's a very interesting position to be.
Honourable Karuhanga, please take us through how business to be discussed is arrived at in Parliament. Because now that issue made it look like it's the Speaker who should decide when a member tables a motion. And because even the member that wanted to table it, who was the leader of opposition, did not table it because the Speaker had said, no, it's not an appropriate time to revisit something that was passed illegally, that has a bearing on all Ugandans in that way. So how is it determined, the business, and who determines it?
So the laws that govern Parliament establish the business committee. Now, the business committee is constituted of the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, on the committee chairpersons, and some, I think, other fewer categories of members. Now, the essence of this committee, or business committee, is primarily to agree on how to run business in a given sitting or session. So it's not entirely preserve of the Speaker, at least it's in the very specific terms in the law, to decide to say, no, this is what I want, or this is not what I so I don't want this. No, that shouldn't be. And I think the coining of that business committee process or procedure was hinged. People must have had the hindsight of a situation like this one, where you have a Speaker who is not very comfortable with a given item to be discussed or debated. So that's why they didn't leave it in the hands of an individual to determine what is basically handled. However, the practice has been largely different. I think largely the leadership of Parliament, in a way, overwhelms the entire system, the clerk's office. So they literally dictate on what is handled. So I think the opposition had a point. We all saw that there was certainly an issue with how that resolution was passed, and so ordinarily you would have said, okay, to clean up, maybe let's revisit this, and since members are not comfortable, but again, it all goes back to the way this country is being run. So who was interested in having shares in Rocco? Which Ugandans were interested in this because I've been trying to talk to Ugandans about this to find who because we love investments either as individuals or as a country. But I have not found Ugandans who are really interested in investing in Rocco. So where did this stem from? To whose benefit? And if government Rocco, I think does quite a number of government projects. So probably the most, if Rocco was running broke, the biggest, probably the biggest person who owned Rocco should have been government of Uganda. Then pay Rocco. Yeah. Don't say we are not paying, then we come around and say we want to buy shares.
Yeah.
So what is shares? And so I think this again speaks volumes to the lack of transparency, openness. I've seen countries that are very progressive now. They even run on a system called open government. The reason being that everything they do, to the extent that even all the public servants' salaries are put online. Whatever they do, because everything the public officials do is done on behalf of the people.
Yeah.
It's not a private company. It's a public organization. It's a public entity. So now for us, we seem to be closing again now. We seem to be taking the direction of closing every little space as opposed to pushing for opening. Now for us, we seem to be pushing for closing and closing and closing and closing. So I think it's exceedingly unacceptable that the leadership of an institution like Parliament, and unfortunately, which has now become the trend of the other institutions. I mean, talk about the judiciary. Yeah. So, and you can as well talk about the police, because it's one after the other and the other, and you can all see everyone is working so hard to please the status quo. Make sure we are in good books. We are in good books of the headmaster. Yeah, you can see everyone really, the efforts and the way everyone puts in their energies. It is so sad that the whole country is reduced to the wishes and wills of a person. I mean, the president is just an individual who is mortal like any other human being. So you want to believe that we should still have men and women of guts, of saying, stand the pressure and say, but look, this is the right thing to do. And the more we have those, then the more we can push the country on the right trajectory. But increasingly, when everybody is fumbling, is literally cowardizing, is just shaking to please the
And now
then you can only end up with an exceedingly shaky state of affairs. Very unpredictable, where it can easily end. Yeah.
now we don't have just the headmaster. We have so many power centers
Yes.
that there's a headmaster and many headmistresses maybe, and another headmaster
Oh,
somewhere.
dear.
But my final question to both of you, I'll start with you, Honourable Karuhanga, is Chemonges here started by saying we had hoped the president wouldn't assent to this bill. That alone is scary. So we have Parliament's main role is to keep the executive in check, that oversight. But when you find that now our hope is in Museveni, who we know is the one that normally comes up with the laws that are muzzling, but this time he's the one in whom our hope was of not assenting to this bill into law. What does that say about where we are going, or where we already are, as you put it?
Sometimes when there is little hope, there can be, you know, in a village you can have things disappearing. Matoke, sweet potatoes in people's gardens. And then somehow the village somehow says, but it appears these three families, they never dig, they always have food. But then you reach a point where you are in such a very desperate situation that you even end up running into one of those places, one of those families for rescue. You know that surely going here is not the best place to go. But the situation is, I mean, seriously, it is so desperate. Imagine that the entire Uganda, we failed to get a good law processed. And then we say,
is that hoping
that that this may be the president, may not as like seriously, like how can we even how can even anyone, because I mean, but you see, that's how desperate now we are, that you are hoping that maybe
beyond hope.
Yeah, that maybe it is sad. It's really so sad, but it speaks again a lot, because it says it says a lot on how you know, they say that when you hit the bottom you can only get up. But for some reason we seem to have hit the bottom and we seem to be stuck at the bottom. I don't know what is going. So I mean, it honestly speaks so much of how much we've sunk. That you can empower 529 members of parliament to make laws, and then they make these very drastic, draconian, unbelievable laws, and then you are hoping that probably the person pushing them to make these laws could be the one who may not actually assent to the laws. It's such a very dire situation. And sometimes you know, you keep hoping that we really need the Almighty's intervention. I think it should come yesterday. Because you keep wondering, if this remains the trend, like, where shall we be in another 5 or 10 years? Like seriously, you just, if it will remain, it's like you have this vehicle, the brakes are no more, and you are on a slope. It's a very steep slope. So you can only be really hoping that it can only be God who must save the situation. It's sad. It's really sad. But lastly, I think largely why we are also here, truth be said, that increasingly the objective men and women of this country with great potential, competencies and capabilities have also shunned leadership. You can tell from the quality of the councillors that we have, of district leaderships, of parliament, that you can really tell seriously.
But why are you calling it shunning leadership when your testimony here that actually people can make sure you live politics?
You see, I mean, well, there is, of course, there is the blockage of there is the whole interference, the whole impediment of how the whole process, the process are manipulated. The elections are heavily manipulated.
And
that's certainly also a big cause. That's also very true. But even, I mean, you can tell that even those who, to be honest, even those who present themselves for leadership, because you see, if the sample, let's say, if let's say 10,000 for run, and among them, let's say 9,000 were objective, were the objective people, chances are that you'd get 60% of them, being members of parliament. But if you have, let's say, 10% of them are the objective people running, then it becomes almost obvious that you're going to end up with praise singers, basically doing a rubber stamping job, and doing it very well, by the way. So so I think we must also try to encourage ourselves, because again, how is this situation going to be turned around when all is said and done? the only way it can be turned around is by us. So I still pro, especially the young leaders, those who are interested in leadership, please get involved.
Against all odds.
Yes,
The
against all
money,
odds.
the
Yes, against all the money.
military,
We must, because I mean, how we all wish the circumstances would be different, would be smoother, would be, you know, leveled. Yeah, well, that's what we would wish, but that's not what we don't have that. So, but do we give up on our country? Do we all be resigned? No, we can't. We must still tap into our deepest of efforts, even that little hope that's still remaining. Tap into it and say, let me do this for my country. Maybe tomorrow will be different. And in most cases, if there are many more people thinking that way, working that way, tomorrow becomes different.
That is a very nice conclusion. Now to you, lastly, Tim, you were hoping that the president wouldn't assent to this bill. And Honourable Karuhanga said something that made me laugh. By the time we even start hoping that the person who sends those bills there, who wants those bills to be passed, that he's the one that will save us now. Well, doesn't that speak a lot about the desperation?
So, Agatha, you know, there are many stopgaps that we have. There are a number of bills that have been returned by the head of state to Parliament.
Why?
In
Because
session.
they are so much linked to the population.
Yeah, I would imagine there are a number of them, and so in each stopgap, at each
He
stage,
has never returned any in consideration of the population. No. You can't think of any, can you?
So at the state, and I agree with Honourable here, this should not be the state we should be finding ourselves. But since we are here now, you find that you are trying to grab the little hope that you can. And so since it was the next stage that now ideally probably should have.
We had hoped for a miracle.
So the next step now, at least in our system, is to the judiciary, for which we choose to believe that they are objective and
which is also hoping against hope.
Their cause is really for the justice, and sometimes our feelings are elsewhere. So it's a sad state we find ourselves in. The need to continue holding our members of parliament accountable is on high demand on whatever forum, and this is one of those that civic space is one of those platforms in which we can relay whatever we think and we ideally should happen. We have other avenues where we can reach out to the members directly on one-on-one. The only unfortunate bit is that it's for the citizens until the 5 years. That's when we try to hold them accountable by determining whether they come back. But not all is lost. There is still hope. This is our country. We are not going anywhere. Many of us, this is the only place really we have. If we choose to give up, then it means that there is really nice. So it's just continuing to fight, continue pushing for what is good and for what is right.
Unless any of you had any final comments to make, I think.
Basically, maybe wish the young people a great future. It appears every society at one given point relies heavily on the energies, but also the resolutions, how resolute the younger citizens or members of that society are. So we can have a little bit of fun. I mean, people like talking about how Kampala is a fun place. And that's okay, that's good. Probably it attracts a bit of tourism.
It also helps us distress.
Yeah, it also takes away the stress, yeah. But I think we have to also work out ways of, again, not abandoning our civic duty as citizens. So there is a lot we can still do. Even so let's not lose hope. You know, sometimes it cannot look very gloomy, like a very hopeless situation. But actually, when you check some places, some countries, in their past, they have probably been in a probably worse state than we are. But how do they turn the tide around? they go together to think together. And there was a committed cohort. And they said, let's drive this country into a decent direction. So that's still possible. So we implore the young people of this country, let's own up. It's our country. We can develop it. We can get it to our dreams.
Thank you, Honourable. Mr. Your final.
So mine to the members, of course, and to the honourable members that we choose to tell you that you hold our hopes, you hold our voices, and if we've given you that privilege to do that, then the only expectation is to do the best. To the public, I think what I keep on saying is that for the institution of parliament, it is constitutionally mandated to do 4 major roles, which is representation, including legislation, appropriation, and oversight. And so even when we understand that, we continue demanding and holding them accountable in those fronts. Not all is hope is lost, there is still hope.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you, Honourable Gerald, for being here. I think for me, my takeaway from this show is that even one person can stand up to Honourable Gerald Karuhanga. Here told us about 2 stories of how he stood up against a committee that was smuggling an issue in a report that wasn't part of the deliberations and ended up in court, but also how he fought against the certificate of financial implications that was also stifling and limiting members of parliament from maybe bringing forward bills that are not very popular to the establishment. Yeah, also I remember that Honourable Gerald at some point took the Attorney General to court again over the reappointment of a Chief Justice who had reached retirement. So I think for me that means that the MPs can't have excuses of I am outnumbered, we are outnumbered, and we've had those so many times. So at least one should stand up and they are counted and the record captures that, because by the time we are hoping that the president, the executive, which the parliament is supposed to hold to account, is the one that should save us from a draconian and really outrightly ridiculous law, it means that all hope in parliament is really dwindling, which is what parliament should think about more carefully and rethink their position in this country. Thank you for being with us on Civic Space TV. From us here, it is a good weekend. We'll see you again next week with the show Focus on Parliament.